All right. Welcome in, everybody, to my first ever NFL podcast show. My name is Case Kajani. I'm just a guy who loves football, just wanting to re enter the podcast game after a few years off. And joining me is my very special guest. He is the host of the Liberation Hour podcast on YouTube. He has his own high school football blog on the website Patreon, and he's an all around badass, Mr. Aaron Jackson. Aaron, thank you so much for being on the inaugural episode of the T
Well, shoot,
Touchdown Drives podcast.
shoot. That's a heck of an intro right there. I mean, shoot, I'm flattered. I gotta say, I'm obviously used to being on the other end of this, but no, man, I really appreciate you reaching out, and I'm looking forward to this and all. Of course, I have my favorite skyline behind me right here of a team that did not exactly have the best week last week, but I'm looking forward to getting into some of these games, and I'm really excited that you're starting this up.
Oh yeah, and truly, truly appreciate you. For those of you that don't know, Aaron actually, when he was in high school, he actually had his own talk show during lunchtime in the theaters. When I was a little freshman at Lincoln, he was a bit sophomore, junior, having his own talk show in the theater where he would come up and ask people questions about politics and sport. Of course, your Liberation Hour show is a smash hit. I recommend anybody to watch it because you dwell into the politics and stuff like that. Just before we get into the games, talk about how you got wanted to pursue journalism as a career, your work with like high school sports, and just kind of why you wanted to do this for a career.
Yeah, so actually, when I was much younger, when I was in middle school, back in like eighth grade, I've always been like a math person. I'm now much more of a history person, but I wanted to be an accountant. And then sophomore, I think I started becoming a big football fan like seventh, eighth grade, and then sophomore year of high school came, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to try out journalism. So I went to the school newspaper, did some general stuff, and was like, hey, I kind of like sports. Is it cool if I do a lot of sports stuff? And from there, I started covering the football team at the school, covered some other stuff. I played a couple sports at Lincoln High School, and then from there, things just kind of took off, and I decided I wanted to pursue it as a major in college. Went to a junior college for a couple years, then graduated from Sacramento State University. Of course, during COVID, so didn't get to walk the stage, but it is what it is. And then got with a company called Gold Country Media. Did some stuff with them. Actually, did some stringer work throughout my time in college, and then worked for them for a couple years. And then I decided to start up my own page, and it's been going strong. And I'm doing announcing. I'm doing public address announcing, like I just did at the school for flag football. So I'm all over the place right now, but it's fun. I think I enjoy the doing the announcing and podcasts like this more than anything, just because it gives a voice out there to people, and you can talk about things that sometimes aren't talked about as much, especially in the political side of things, or on the sports side of things. Obviously, there's always a hunger and a desire for people to hear more about that. So it's just always been a passion of mine, and I look forward to continuing it in any avenue or respect that I can.
Well, your work is incredible. I love the Liberation Hour. Highly, highly recommend. Go watch it on YouTube. You have some great guests on there. You definitely know what you're talking about, despite your, lack of being in the political side. So, and I appreciate, the candid stuff that you put out there. So, let's get into a very wild week 2. And we're going to start with probably the biggest shocker of the entire weekend. The New Orleans Saints, fresh off 47 points against the Carolina Panthers, roll into AT&T Stadium, who I hate, and my team that I despise in the Dallas Cowboys, being a Niners fan, and they ran roughshod all over them. Alvin Kamara goes for 4 touchdowns. Derek Carr, 11 of 16. He only completed 11 passes. He only threw 16 passes, but he still went for over 230 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a bomb and a beauty to Rashid Shaheed, 70-yard touchdown bomb. And this was Dallas's first regular season home loss since 2022, a string of 16 consecutive games they had won at AT&T Center in the regular season. We're not going to include the playoffs because they lost the wild card game to the Packers last year in humiliating fashion. Aaron, your thoughts on the New Orleans Saints? They look every bit like a Super Bowl contender right now.
Yeah, just to start off with the Cowboys, because as you mentioned, we're both Niner fans. We got to talk about the Cowboys a little bit.
Of course,
You
of
know,
course.
you mentioned that Packers game, and it was actually very interesting you brought that up because it's very comparable to this game where I think it really stunned a lot of people. I actually did pick the Saints in this game in my pick'ems last week, but I thought this would be like a one touchdown game, come down to the wire. And I don't know what's going on, but the ghost of Drew Brees is the soul of Drew Brees has entered Derek Carr's body because oh my goodness, talk about an MVP candidate to start the season. Derek Carr stunting all over the Cowboys in this game for the Saints. Alvin Kamara. I mean, he's a good running back, but I haven't necessarily thought of him as a top tier running back really for years now. And he looks like a top five running back in the league after what, the Cowboys let him do on Sunday. But that's another thing is I feel like this year in general, the running back market is very mediocre compared to what it's been in the past. But ironically, NFL teams are averaging 125 rushing yards per game, the highest average through the first 2 weeks in 41 years. And the Cowboys are averaging about 40 yards below that. When your leading rusher is Rico Dowdle with 30 yards, there's a problem there, and the Cowboys have a big problem when it comes to their run game. When it comes to only having Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott, I really would not be surprised if the Cowboys start considering at least trying to give Dalvin Cook some carries or some looks on the starting team soon. But yeah, a very bad performance by the Cowboys and an incredible performance by the Saints. Don't take anything away from them. They're a team to definitely keep eyes on going forward because I think a lot of people like myself thought the NFC South was going to be kind of a mid division this year, but it's already looking like it might be one of the better ones out there.
No doubt. And you said Alvin Kamara is a top five running back in the league right now. Right now, through 2 weeks, he's probably the best running back in the
He
league.
might be, yeah.
He has been incredible. Like people forget, like 6 years ago, he was putting up six touchdown games against the Minnesota Vikings back in 2018. But he has just been hampered with injuries for the last few years. He's dealt with a lot of ankle and hamstring injuries that have really hampered his play. But I think a lot of credit, and rightfully so, goes to the brand new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, the former passing games coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, coming from that Kyle Shanahan tree, unlocking a version of Derek Carr that no one thought was possible. This is a better version of Derek Carr than some of his years on the Raiders, and he had a lot of good years on the Raiders. People forget that Derek Carr was a very good quarterback when he was in the Raiders, but now he's elevated his game to an MVP level. And the best thing I love about New Orleans is they have the veterans on all sides of the ball, like a veteran quarterback in Carr, a veteran fullback do it all in Taysom Hill. You got the vets on defense with Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Honey Badger Super Bowl champ Tyrann Mathieu, but you got all these young guys. Chris Olave, the star receiver, Rashid Shaheed, young guy, Paulson Adebo, a top corner, Alante Taylor, a very young, very promising young corner. So the best part about this Saints team is they have experience, they have youth. The defense was always good under head coach Dennis Allen. That was his mantra. He was the defensive coordinator when Sean Payton and him were going to the Super Bowl and they won a Super Bowl, but he took over as head coach and it didn't really work out. But they finally have probably the best offense going in the league right now. Aaron, can they sustain this 40-point streak? And are they a legit Super Bowl contender?
It's funny because I think the Super Bowl this year is actually going to be played at the Superdome. So imagine the Saints being at their home place. I mean, that would just be wild. I mean, it would be Mardi Gras 2.0 in New Orleans for sure. But I gotta say, you mentioned the Raiders, and man, what a horrible. I mean, Josh McDaniels, what a horrible coach he was to not be able to find the potential in Derek Carr out there, and Derek Carr doing an incredible things over in New Orleans. I do think it's going to continue going forward. They do, have a relatively difficult schedule ahead of them right now. I think that division really is a toss up right now. I think I picked the Falcons going into it. The Falcons did just beat the Eagles, but the Eagles are also 2-9. I know we're going to get into that a little bit. The Buccaneers have been playing really well as well. They pulled off arguably an upset on Sunday. This could be a really fun division to watch. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Saints and the Bucks. I would say right now, I think 9-8 is probably going to be the marker to make the playoffs, the top seven seed in the NFC. I very easily could see the Saints doing that. So right now, I think you have to put them at least in the conversation. I still think there's some teams ahead of them, the NFC. I would say that have a little bit bigger of a shot, but definitely the Saints are a team for people to keep eyes on going forward.
The most impressive part with the Saints is they have an MVP candidate in Alvin Kamara who is getting 4 touchdowns, but Derek Carr only completing 11 passes in that game. His average yards per attempt was 15 and a half. That's higher than guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud, these top tier elite level quarterbacks. If Derek Carr is putting up those type of numbers, they're easily a Super Bowl. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl right now. The way they're looking, they're complete on both sides of the ball. They have a strong run game, an elite secondary. They held Dak Prescott to only 1 touchdown. They picked him off twice. And the touchdown they gave up was basically a busted coverage that led to CeeDee Lamb basically doing CeeDee Lamb stuff. But outside, the one reservation, though, I have with the Saints is they beat up on the Carolina Panthers, who just benched the former #1 overall pick in Bryce Young, and the Cowboys, who outside of CeeDee Lamb, they have no receivers, and they have barely a run game. So let's see them do it against, they're facing the Eagles next week. Jalen Hurts, while inconsistent, still is a very, very good quarterback. They have a defense. They have a Saquon Barkley they have to stop. So let's see them do it against the elite competition instead of just like these bottom mid-feeder teams. But they look fantastic right now.
Yeah, and I think a game that's really going to define how good this team really is and what their true potential is a couple of weeks from now on Monday Night Football when they play the Chiefs, because that's going to be the test of how real of a team is this. If they can keep that a ball game, if that's a battle down to the final minutes of the fourth quarter, watch out. We're talking about a team that most definitely could be a Super Bowl contender.
And then let's just briefly talk about the Cowboys because it makes our hearts smile to rip on their heads. They had a few holdouts during training camp. Dak Prescott gets the big contract. CeeDee Lamb gets his money. They have a great showing against the Cleveland Browns. They blitz them. But again, it's the Cleveland Browns. They're still dealing with a quarterback that has the legal issues that he does and an offense that was missing 2 starting tackles and their starting running back. But they just have no consistent weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb. It's ironic that they traded Amari Cooper to the Cleveland Browns, and they're missing that second wideout next to CeeDee Lamb, which makes that trade look even worse. They have no defense. They lost a bunch of defensive pieces to Washington, along with their former defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn, when he took the job in Washington. They have no run game because they lost Tony Pollard. And Jerry Jones said they're going all in, but it looks like they're just going in all in for mediocrity. Like maybe a 9-8 finish is probably like the ceiling for them, this roster. Like, are we looking at major changes in Dallas if this season doesn't go well?
The best, and I don't want to say this, but at the same time, it's true. The best thing that could happen to the Dallas Cowboys as an organization would be Jerry Jones turning the reins over to somebody else, because he is a guy that only cares about money and selling tickets. And if they do that, then they're happy about it. If they have, fans that are running into the stadium when they open every week, then they're happy about it. But it's pathetic what they're putting out there on the field for being, a team that gets hyped up in the way that they do every single offseason. I will say them not having Jake Ferguson this week, I think hurt them a little bit as well. I do expect Jake Ferguson to be one of the better tight ends in the league this year once he's healthy. You would think with the like you mentioned, the money that they gave Dak, the money that they gave CeeDee, that there would be a lot to prove out there. And I do still believe that Dak could be an elite tier, elite level quarterback. But when your second best weapon out there is Brandon Cooks, who is washed, honestly, it's going to be very tough out there. So I really don't know the answer. I think that, Jerry had multiple opportunities during free agency to go after some guys on both sides of the ball, and he really chose to just, keep things the way they are. And we've seen, how that plays out. I mean, the Cowboys Cowboys right now, in my opinion, they're a 9-8, maybe 10-7 team waiting to happen and another first round exit. Another thing I have to mention too is Mike McCarthy is not the answer to this team. He is a horrible play caller. He's a horrible game manager. He was lucky because like he had a generational quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, with him up in Green Bay, but he has never, in my opinion, been the answer or been a great coach. They need to get rid of Mike McCarthy, and then nothing is truly going to change in a major positive light until Jerry Jones leaves that organization.
I totally agree with you. And like, like Stephen A. Smith probably puts it best. What can go wrong with the Cowboys will go wrong. And it usually goes wrong in the most inopportune and worst ways possible. Mike McCarthy is probably done as Dallas Cowboys head coach if he does not win this year, and they likely won't be winning the division because they still have to go through the Eagles, who are inconsistent, but when they're on, they're on. They're probably that best team in that division. They just are too inconsistent, so that division probably is a toss-up right now. But
9-7 could win that division. I'm not even lying. Like that division is not good right now. The Commanders and Giants are not good as we saw on Sunday. I would think 10-7, but 9-8 I should say might win that division, which is sad.
Yeah, it's the NFC. Basically, it's back to being the NFC least again,
Yeah.
and the teams are so irrelevant in that division. Like nobody is going to fear going into either Dallas or Philadelphia for a home playoff game. And if it's either the Commanders or the Giants, they're going to get smothered by whoever that fifth seed is. But the Saints just look. But let's keep it on the Saints and not rip the Dallas Cowboys much longer because the Saints just look unbelievable right now. They look unbelievable. And that division is going to be such a bloodbath. Now that Atlanta's finally gotten the Kirk Cousins they paid $160 million to, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going into Detroit and getting a win. We're going to get to that game in just a little bit. But right now, to me, the Saints are the Super Bowl favorites because they have a complete team on both sides. They're incredibly well coached. But can the offense sustain itself? I don't know because Carr is getting a lot of wide open receivers on those deep balls. Can that continue against very elite corners? Because as good as the Dallas Cowboys corners duo is with Trevon Diggs and DaRon Bland, they always did have a tendency to get beat deep. Quite often, you saw both Diggs and Bland get burned quite often for big time touchdowns. So let's see him do it against elite teams with elite offenses and elite quarterbacks. But a hell of a start right now for the New Orleans Saints. Let's get to the second biggest shocker of the weekend, but maybe not so shocking considering the injuries on one side, but the Arizona Cardinals stomping past the Rams 41-10. Kyler Murray, the perfect passer rating, 268 yards, 3 touchdowns. The rookie Marvin Harrison Jr., 130 receiving yards on just 9 catches, including 83 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Aaron, this Arizona Cardinals team was very young and very spunky last year, but if everything broke right, this team could be a real force real soon.
You have no idea how salty I was watching the results come in of this game, stat wise and result. I said before the season started, Arizona's got some good pieces, but they're not there yet. I think they're going to be competing with Seattle for last in that division, and there's still a chance that could be the case. However, James Conner is running the ball incredible. He looks better than he did when he was in Pittsburgh. I'm mad because I proposed to trade in my fantasy league for Marvin Harrison Jr., and it got declined. Understandable now why it got declined because he just went for a wild game for 32 and a half yards per reception and a couple of touchdowns. Trey McBride looked great out there. I mean, they have legit weapons. I didn't think they would have, some great weapons going in, but Kyler Murray has guys he can throw the ball to. I mean, this is a team that was going through turmoil just over the last couple seasons. And then what they've been able to do through the draft, what they've had coming in, and what they did on Sunday was incredible. So, yeah, the Cardinals, another team to watch going forward. I think James Conner is right now up there in those top 5 running back conversations as well.
He is, and I have to give myself a pat on the back for drafting James Conner onto my fantasy team. Both of them didn't help me in one league, but helped me in the other. But we all got to remember, before Kyler Murray, was in Cliff Kingsbury's offense, this dude, there's a reason why that dude was the number one pick. He always had the talent of someone like a Lamar Jackson. But the difference between him and Lamar is A, he's got better receivers around him. B, he's got a much better arm than Lamar ever has in his career. You mentioned a guy like Trey McBride catching all 7 of his targets for over 70 yards. James Conner looking fantastic, and that defense. It's a very young defense in Arizona. Not a lot of vets on that squad. They sacked Matthew Stafford 6 times. Now the asterisk to sacking Matthew Stafford 6 times is 3 out of 5 of his starting offensive linemen were out. They have barely a run game because of the banged up offensive line. Their top 2 receivers in Puka Nacua, who had an all-pro rookie season last year, and of course a stud in Cooper Kupp, are Puka Nacua didn't even play in this game, and Cooper Kupp left this game hurt. So they barely have anything around them, and it looks like even if these guys come back, this team could be sitting at a 1-8, 2-7 start with the way their schedule looks. This could be a very lost year for the Rams, and a lot of questions going into them with Matthew Stafford getting a little bit older, and questions about who's going to be the franchise quarterback moving forward once he decides to hang it up.
And it's a shocker to me because I thought the Rams would be a potential playoff team coming into the season because, I really was really high on Kyren Williams going into the season. I was like, Kyren Williams, he looked good last year. This might be his breakout year. He might be a top tier running back. And he's been nothing but a major disappointment the first couple weeks of the season. And, Blake Corum, honestly, who I believe is a rookie this year, looks better than him. And it's crazy. And, only 53 rushing yards for the Rams on Sunday. And again, they, like you mentioned, they don't have a lot of guys to throw the ball to right now. So, I mean, Sunday's game against the Niners is going to be potentially, it could get ugly. But just going back to the Cardinals for a second, because you mentioned some guys that are young in that defense. Of course, Dennis Gardeck had 6 tackles and 3 sacks, but they have a veteran in Budda Baker who did an incredible job and led the way. I'm very interested to see, what the Cardinals can do going forward. I think I'm still trying to get tickets to it, the Cardinal Niner game on October 6th, and that could be a game that might actually be a fun one to watch. It could be very competitive. I'm very impressed by Arizona. Still salty about Kyler Murray as an Oakland A's fan, although I'm losing my fan status with them once they move to Vegas, so maybe not as salty anymore. But still, credit to Kyler Murray, credit to Marvin Harrison, credit to the Cardinals for an incredible game.
I think a guy that doesn't really get talked about enough with the Arizona Cardinals is Jonathan Gannon, the former defensive coordinator of the Eagles, who became the head coach of the Cardinals last year. They were very competitive through the early part of the year with a guy like Josh Dobbs at quarterback. They were still very competitive and in a lot of games. This guy brings a ton of energy and enthusiasm to all of his players. And Kyler, I was lucky enough to actually go to his rookie game in 2020 and 2019-20, where Jimmy Garoppolo was still at quarterback. The Niners had one of the top defenses in the league, and Kyler Murray torched them. It took a Jeff Wilson game-winning touchdown to win that game right at the end of the game. But Kyler Murray, there's a reason why he was picked number 1 in the first place. He always has had the talent. He just was a little rusty coming off an ACL injury. It just took him some time to shake it off, but it speaks to the Cardinals believing in him, because there was a lot of questions where they were should they draft a franchise quarterback with all these top tier talent like JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, other guys up and down the board, but they chose to believe in him and they gave him Marvin Harrison Jr. Oh boy, it's looking real nice for the. You think they could be a wild card team? Because they look every bit like it, at least in this game.
Well, so going into the season, and of course, things have wildly changed in the first 2 weeks. I had the Bears or the Cowboys being the final wild card team. I don't think either of those teams right now I would put in the conversation of being in the playoffs. I think you have to put Arizona up there right now. I mean, admittedly, they look like a top 10 team in the league the way they've played the first couple weeks of the season. They had a battle against the Bills week 1. game that they were in the lead most of the game, didn't come away. But I mean, they look really solid right now, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Arizona has going forward. I think that they're in that conversation at least for sure.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And then as for the Rams, they got a big one next week in San Francisco. They lose that game, it's probably their season's probably done at 0-3. There's a lot of tough teams in the NFC. They lose to the Niners. They've already lost 2 division games. Their division basically is out of reach. If they're sitting at like 1-7, 2-6 by the time Nakua and Cup come back, probably they just say, hey, we'll just let you guys sit. We'll just try and get a high draft pick and try again next year. But for Arizona, they resemble a lot of what the Houston Texans were last year, where they became a surprise team. They were really young on both sides of the ball, but they really impressed. They built it through the draft, and they went 9-8, won the AFC South. They won a playoff game against the Browns, and they gave the Ravens at least some run for their money in one half a play. But Arizona looks really, really good right now. I'm scared as a Niners fan when they come to town with the injuries they have. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off for us Niner fans right now. The 49ers go up to Minnesota. They lose again. The 8th straight time they've lost in Minnesota. They haven't won in Minnesota since 1992. And the worst part of it all was our former backup, Sam Darnold, destroyed us in every which way possible, including a 97-yard bomb of a touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson. All right, Aaron, rip the Band-Aid off. How bad were the Niners, and are they really a Super Bowl team anymore?
Yes, they're still in the conversation of being a Super Bowl team. I'm not ready to give up on them yet, but just absolute. It seems like they're at 1 out of every 6 games, our defense just goes to nothing. Like our secondary goes to crap. Our line D line goes to crap. Fred Warner had an MVP style week, and he is having not an MVP style season, a Defensive Player of the Year season so far. He was all over the field in this game, had an interception that kept the Niners in the game, had 7 tackles, was all over the field, but the secondary just went absolutely quiet. Diamador Lenore, a guy who I've praised in the past, looked horrible in this game. Charvarius Ward, non-existent whatsoever. Hargrave, non-existent. We're talking guys who have been dominant defensive players, either in the secondary or on the line for years, and they did nothing in this game. And Minnesota made them, and Sam Darnold made them look silly in this game. I mean, you have to give credit to Sam Darnold. He, through 2 weeks, has to be in that MVP conversation as well. Of course, Justin Jefferson had an incredible game, but again, this is without Jordan Addison. They didn't even have Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson, their tight end, who has been great for many years. So, I mean, the fact that they're doing this without 2 of their 3 biggest weapons, and they don't have the best run game in the league. When your run game is Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones, who's past his prime, and you're still doing what you did to San Francisco, that's scary. I mean, that's a team to watch going forward. Again, huge credit to the Vikings defense, who played an absolutely amazing game. Blake Cashman, Ivan Pace Jr., Stephon Gilmore, who's on that squad now. I mean, of course, Harrison Smith, you have to mention. They were all over the field and just great during the game. Purdy still put up good numbers, but this is a game where numbers don't always tell the full story. Purdy might have had a good passer rating, may have had a good completion percentage, but he made some plays that were very questionable, made some throws that were very questionable, and the Niners they did not have their best stuff on Sunday.
No, they did not. And I think the microcosm of that game was Jair Brown, and I believe it was Lenore, were kind of behind Justin Jefferson on the bomb that Sam Darnold threw, and they just kind of blew it. And he was basically like wide open once he caught it, and then he just kind of busted wide open, and then just went into the end zone. They were up 10-0 at that point. Basically, when that happened, I was like, game's over. Like, better shut it down. But Fred Warner, Defensive Player of the Year, hopefully, if they can keep it up. He saved that game, because if Aaron Jones, if he scores that touchdown, it's 27-7 at that point, and that game ends probably pretty early. But The Niners are one of the oldest teams in the league. I believe the third oldest roster in the league. And they had guys on holdout. Trent Williams, the all-pro left tackle, missed all of training camp with the contract holdout. Brandon Aiyuk missed all of training camp, didn't play in the preseason, was a holdout. Christian McCaffrey, the best running back in the league, hasn't played all year, calf strain. He's not playing for a while. Deebo Samuel left this game hurt. He has a calf strain. He's out a couple of weeks. But when they're right, they're right. And Brock Purdy took an unusual amount of pressure. 6 sacks in that game. Brian Flores, all credit in the world to him. He knows how to coach some defense. Still don't understand why he doesn't have a head coaching job. He did a terrific job. The game plan, Brock, you could see in like the post game, Brock Purdy goes over to Brian Flores and he says, "Your scheme is crazy," and it is. Like Jordan Mason, who's been filling in for McCaffrey, he's done a great job. 5 yards of carrying that game, over 100 yards and a touchdown, but he's not CMC. Like the Niners need to get all their players back and healthy, and they got one significant piece back today as All-Pro safety Talanoa Hufanga will likely make his season debut on Sunday against the Rams, coming off that ACL tear in Week 10 of last year against the Buccaneers. But things do not look good right now in San Francisco, and people are really questioning Brock Purdy right now.
And I don't think he's the right person to question. One thing I'll say is, you're right about what you said about Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, that's a hurt him not being there. You can look at Mason's numbers and say, hey, he's putting up good numbers enough for the Niners to be good and win ball games, which is true. But what makes McCaffrey such an amazing back and what maybe the best player in the NFL is his ability to be a threat also when it comes to the passing game, able to, run solid routes, in the backfield and also, get himself open to where he can create some space out there too. Jordan Mason does not have that ability. And that also hurts because then you're able to key in on guys like Deebo and key in on guys like Aiyuk a little bit more. I will say I was very disappointed with Brandon Aiyuk's performance in this game. Again, coming off of that contract with $30 million a year and, dropping multiple balls in this game, not, being able to, create separation and get open. It's a little concerning for sure as a Niner fan going forward. But, the crazy thing is, as bad as the Niners looked in this game, as bad as they played and as good as Minnesota played, the Niners still had a chance to win this game down the stretch. There was, I want to say, 3.5 minutes left to go, or 4 minutes left to go, a huge 3rd and 12 in Vikings territory near the 40-yard line, and Darnold completed it up the middle, and there were 2 Niners right in the area that easily could have converged, and they were just late to the play. That's how it shows me why I think the Niners are still a Super Bowl team. Is Minnesota's a good team. I think that they've got a really good chance to, make a run, and we're going to see how good they are as they've got a tough schedule coming up as well. But the Niners only lost this game by 6 points when they easily could have lost it by more. That shows that they were able to still manage this game, keep it close, and give themselves a fighting chance down to the end. But again, a lot's going to be said on Sunday when they face the Rams, because the Niners are going to be without some guys like Deebo. The Rams are going to be without some guys. It's going to look like a Week 18 game that has nothing, that doesn't matter at all. But it's going to still matter for both of these teams a lot. One other thing I just wanted to say real quick is I got to give big shout out to George Kittle. I know that, he's used much more in the Niners offense traditionally as a blocking tight end, but he was forced to go out there and be a weapon and be a threat out there. And he did a great job, 7 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. It's not something you're going to get every week out of him, but they needed it this week and he stepped up and, answered the call. So credit to some guys on the Niners like Kittle and like Warner, but there's guys that definitely still need to step up. Purdy needs to be smarter and better in certain situations. The O-line needs to step up, and we're going to really learn who this team is, I think, over the next couple of weeks.
I agree, because their next 3 games without Deebo and McCaffrey, at LA, home against the Patriots, at home against the Arizona Cardinals. And then they have a really, really important game in Seattle against the very, very much in play for top seed in the NFC West, Seattle Seahawks, with even some inconsistent offense. We'll get to them maybe in a little bit. But I've seen Brock Purdy like he's not worth $60 million. He's not the franchise quarterback. Brock Purdy, for all the struggles he had in that game, still first in the league in passing yards, still top 10 in completion percentage and yards per attempt. This guy is still one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, but it's probably the one that needs to step up the most is the guy they just give the big contract to, the $30 million receiver in Brandon Aiyuk. Here are his stats for the entire season: 6 catches for 72 yards. That's it. Like, this guy's getting paid as much as Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he is not producing at Amon-Ra St. Brown level. Well, maybe he is producing at Amon-Ra St. Brown level with the way the Lions look right now, but what is going on with Brandon Aiyuk? You think he's just working his way back into shape, and can he step it up with these guys out?
Well, again, you kind of alluded to the fact that, he held out, obviously. So, he wasn't with the team throughout all of training camp. So, obviously it takes, some time to get back, adjusted back into it. But I mean, he was 1,000-yard receiver and one of the best, I'd say close to top 10 receiver in the league last year. And this is a guy that I like personally because he's a local guy. He's from Rockland. He played high school football in Reno, but actually played college football starting at Sierra College when I was there. So I got to watch him in college. So I have a lot of respect for Brandon Aiyuk, and I enjoy watching him play. But it's been very disappointing as a fan, and just as a person that's a general watcher of the NFL. So he needs to step up. He knows he needs to step up, and he's going to have a golden chance to do it on Sunday because he's going to probably be the primary receiver and the primary target for Brock Purdy against the Rams.
I think the best part for him against the Rams is they're without their top corner as well, and John Johnson III out 6 weeks with a hairline fracture in his foot. The defense is very young outside of him, and they did not do much to slow down the red hot Arizona Cardinals. So this is probably if they don't win this game, we're really gonna have concerns about them being a Super Bowl team. But I think they're gonna get it done. Let's hope they can right the ship for all of us Niner fans and get through this period at least without Debo and McCaffrey. Hopefully they can get Debo back against the Cardinals because I think they're going to need him with the track meet of a game. That's going to be real soon. Let's get to one game that was probably a little less shocking, but has a lot of major implications. Tampa Bay, they go into Detroit. They lose last year in the divisional round to the Lions. Baker Mayfield scores a rushing touchdown to give Tampa Bay the lead late in the fourth quarter. The defense, which was really susceptible last year against the pass, holds the vaunting Lions offense to just 16 points, and Tampa Bay is 2-0 for the first time since a guy who's a future Hall of Famer who won 7 Super Bowls was playing at quarterback for the Buccaneers. What do you have to say about Tampa Bay? They could give the Saints a run for their money right now, the way they're playing.
And again, Baker, you can put in the MVP category right now through 2 weeks as well. It honestly just shows how incompetent the Cleveland Browns are as an organization. They couldn't find out the true potential in Baker Mayfield. He's been a whole new player and quarterback ever since he's been in Tampa Bay. He looked great last year. He's looked great so far this year. I mean, in my opinion, he looks better right now than Tom Brady did in his final season or two with the Buccaneers. And, it's a great sign for them. Everybody I think always talks about Mike Evans and, he's going to be a future Hall of Famer for sure. Chris Godwin, I mean, I think he's getting up there in age right now, but I mean, he had an incredible game in this one, 117 yards and a touchdown. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about, I mean, they still have a little bit, kind of a young running game, is that they didn't get a lot done with the running game. They didn't have to because of how well they played defensively out there. Jordan Whitehead with a phenomenal game, Levante David doing his thing. Jamel Dean, but it's an impressive win for sure. I think the Lions are up there in a lot of people's camps as a top 2 or maybe top 3 seed in the NFC. And for Tampa to be able to go in and get the win in Detroit, they're saying, hey, we're a part of this conversation too. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the NFC South and how competitive it's going to be with, the teams there. So very impressive win by Tampa Bay, and really looking forward to seeing what they're capable of going forward too. They're a team that, obviously I'm not a Buccaneers fan, but they're a team that I'm kind of want to see, what they're capable of. They're a team that it's growing on me a little bit for sure.
I totally agree. Like Baker Mayfield, he was washed away especially when he was in Carolina. This guy was getting benched for Sam Darnold. That basically shows you how competent of an organization the Carolina Panthers are when you're benching your star quarterback when you're benching the guy you traded up for and traded a future first to get Bryce Young. We'll probably mention that and laugh at them in a little bit, but My big concern for the Lions is where's the offense? The defense. Like last year, the defense was always the issue with the Lions. They were bottom 10 in the league against the pass. Aiden Hutchinson goes for 4.5 sacks. The defense holds Baker Mayfield to just one touchdown. But a guy like Jameson Williams, less than 50 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown did nothing. Sam Laporta, just 13 yards. And Jameson Williams, the game prior, 130 yards and a touchdown, including a beauty bomb from Jared Goff against the Rams. Like, where is the Detroit Lions on? And especially the run game, especially with a young guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, who was expected to take a huge leap forward, really has not done anything.
It really felt like it was more so their ability to just not finish drives. They got guys. I don't think Goff played a horrible game. He definitely didn't play a good one. He threw two interceptions out there and made some bonehead decisions, but. Gibbs still ran for 84 yards out there, and they had some decent play, but it just felt like that they couldn't finish out drives. But you mentioned Sam Laporta. I mean, he's a guy that I think a lot of people have looked at as a top three, top four tight end in the league, and he's been a giant nothing burger to start the season too. And his ability to go out there and grab balls also opens up the field for guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown too. So yeah, a little concerning on that front. I think overall the Lions are probably going to be fine. It was a weird game. The Bucs played a really solid game coming in. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Niners Vikings game, and that the Vikings are going to be a team that to watch going forward, just like the Buccaneers are. But ultimately, at the end of the season, the Niners are probably going to be above the Vikings. The Lions are probably going to be above the Buccaneers. But again, it's working out some of these early kinks. It's a matter of finishing out drives when you need to. And the defense didn't do any help for them either in this game. So the Lions definitely have to step up, but they have all the talent that they need to get the job done. And I expect them to be right back in the conversation soon.
Totally agree with you. And they have a huge game next week on Sunday in Arizona against the Red Hot Cardinals. It's a litmus test for the Cardinals to see how far they are, but it's also a get-right game for Detroit because they're the deeper team. They're the more talented team. They've done it before. They need to go out and assert their dominance, but it's going to be really tough going up against this young, really, really hungry Arizona Cardinals team. And they're in a division right now where the Packers, with Malik Willis as starting quarterback, won a game without Jordan Love and hold the Titans to only 10 points. Again, Will Levis is Mr. Turnover prone right now, and he's not been very good for Tennessee at all. But they're still competing with the Bears, who have a very good defense and a rookie quarterback who probably needs a new OC because he's not done very well. Of course, they have Minnesota to compete with. If they're like 1-2, 1-3, or they have sitting like a 500 record midway, they might not win the division with how loaded the NFC North is.
Yeah, and if you would have told me that the Vikings would be leading this division, I mean, I know the Packers are up there too, but the Vikings would be right up there after week two. I would have been a little bit surprised. I think the Packers and the Lions are still probably the top two teams in this division. It's going to be interesting to see what the Packers do without Jordan Love the next few weeks. But I thought going into the season, whoever it is, the Cowboys, if they're the 4 seed, or whoever's the 4 seed, the Eagles, Cowboys, they're going to get thrashed by the Packers or the Lions in the first round. Whoever doesn't win this division, but it's going to be an interesting battle, and it's going to be an interesting fight going forward. Again, as you mentioned, with the Jordan Love injury, and a little bit concerning with the way the Lions played this week.
Yeah, and it's a really, really great sign to see the NFC North looking really, really strong right now. All 4 of those teams, if everything broke right, if Sam Darnold continues to play the way he's playing, if Caleb can finally get it together with the offense, and if the Packers get Jordan Love back, and he was already practicing this week, he might be making a return this Sunday from the injury that quickly, which big surprise for the Green Bay Packers. He's aiming to return. We'll see if he does, but that division is really loaded, really competitive, and the Lions got to get it together real, real quick. We're going to jump back probably to Thursday night. Now, this was kind of an inconsequential game with the Buffalo Bills taking on Miami. We're not going to go into the game too much. James Cook ran all over the Dolphins. Josh Allen throws a touchdown. The defense gets a couple interceptions on Tua. The bigger concern is Dolphins star quarterback Tua Tagovailoa leaving the game with his third documented concussion. And you have all the NFL pundits across the world and a lot of former players like Antonio Pierce and his former friend and future all pro stud Manti Te'o on NFL Network saying he's got to retire. If you were Tua Tagovailoa in this situation, what do you do?
Well, and that's the thing is with how big NFL contracts are nowadays, and especially what they're signing quarterbacks to, is messed up as it is. It almost incentivizes him to where he has to keep playing, even though I don't want to speculate because I'm not a neurologist, but I wouldn't be surprised potentially, if they say something like, hey, you need to be more careful, or maybe, you shouldn't play. As you mentioned, his fourth concussion in the last 6 seasons, but he's also been signed to, I want to say, what, $53, $54 million a year. It might even be more than that. And it's $167 million guaranteed. So it's just like, if he retires, it's so tough because you want to set yourself up and you want to set your kids up for life. But at the same time, you need to focus on your health for the rest of your life too. So it's a tough one. It's not something that, I'm going to make the decision for him on. But at the end of the day, I think life is more important than money. And the smart thing would probably be for him to hang it up, even as sad as it is, because I still think he's got a ton of potential. But the Dolphins just got Tyler Huntley. At least in the meantime, I think that he's a competent enough quarterback to where he'll keep them competitive in games. They play Seattle this week, which is a game that is certainly winnable for them. But it's a one I struggle on because I really feel for Tua, and it sucks the choice that he has to make between giving up that huge chunk of change, but also having to focus on the future of your own personal physical well-being.
And you sign up for that when you play in the NFL. You know the risk of CTE and concussions, but everything I've heard and seen about the Tagovailoa family is they eat, sleep, and breathe football. His brother played at the University of Alabama. He grew up playing football. You dedicate yourself to this game, but at the same time, you have a family. You want to. Manti Te'o said it best. I want him to be with his kids 10, 15 years from now. I want him to walk his daughter down the aisle one day. I want him to be there for all of his kids' biggest moments. It's a decision that he probably has to weigh quite heavily on his mind before he decides to step on the field. He was just placed on IR for 4 weeks, so we won't see him for a while. They're going to roll in with Skylar Thompson next week in Seattle, which let's see what you can do against the Mike Macdonald-led defense. But Tua, if I were him, I would find a way to get as much guaranteed money as you can. I'm sure the Dolphins would do him right, guarantee his contract, and then if he decided to hang it up. But life is more important than football, but hopefully that situation gets resolved pretty soon.
Yeah, the only other couple things I wanted to say about it is, the Dolphins, as you mentioned, are going to go with Skylar. I think Tyler Huntley is a better quarterback. Again, he has only been with the team now less than a week, so it's hard to throw him out there that soon. I wouldn't be surprised to see him start before Tua comes up, assumedly comes back. If he does come back, I wouldn't be surprised to see Huntley start. The only other thing I wanted to say is, of all people to run into on this injury and a person now has to live with, what potentially might be the end of Tua's career, how disgustingly and grossly and sadly iconic is it that it's Damar Hamlin, who obviously had that heartbreaking injury where he nearly passed away out on the field, for Buffalo. And now, he makes the big hit that re-triggers another concussion for Tua. You just got to think Damar's got to be feeling horrible about the situation, knowing what he went through as well. So, still, I'm glad to see Damar back out there on the field again, after everything he's gone through. And hopefully, Tua is able to come out of this and he's able to play football again. But ultimately, I just hope that, health-wise, everything works itself out.
I agree. And Bills Mafia was very kind to Tua, donating over $150,000 to his foundation, stepping up as they always do. Bills Mafia, they showed their support for Tua and his family through this process. And yeah, it's quite ironic that Damar Hamlin did that because 2 years ago, we didn't know if this guy would ever live again with the cardiac arrest sort of nightmare that took place on that field January 2023 January 2023. But yeah, I wish the best for Tua. I hope everything works out for him. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that. But let's get to some other surprising results. The Raiders off a second half comeback drive with Gardner Minshew having 6 out of 8 quarters with some of the worst football play, come back and send the Ravens to an 0-2 start. And in less surprising, but maybe more surprising news, the Denver Broncos lose to the now still unbeaten Pittsburgh Steelers, led by Justin Fields. I don't know how Mike Tomlin does it every year. Which one of those results to you is more surprising? The Steelers being 2-0 and beating the Broncos, or Gardner Minshew beating the Ravens in Baltimore?
The Raiders for sure. I mean, Mike Tomlin's going to find a way to go 9-8 out there all the time. It's just incredible to me how many games that the Ravens have a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter or late in the third quarter and blow it. It just seems like it happens multiple times every year. I hate to say it because I think he's a good coach, but when it comes down to being a game manager in key situations, somebody's maybe got to start questioning John Harbaugh because he cannot find ways to manage games and come out of them unscathed. The Raiders were down 10, I think, in the final 9 minutes of this game, came back to score 13 unanswered to win. And they didn't even have a good run game. Zamir White has looked like garbage out there on the field, if I'm being quite honest with you. And I also say that because he's on my fantasy team and I have to start him every week and it's frustrating. But no, I mean, Gardner Minshew for being a starter, I was saying before the season, I'm surprised they're not going with Aiden O'Connell. But Minshew looked composed throughout the rest of this game. Devontae Adams played a great game. Brock Bowers, I call it true freshman. He's a rookie. I've been watching too much college football recently, but 9 receptions, 98 yards, just an incredible start to the season for him. The Raiders are a team to, I think keep eyes on as a potential wild card team going forward. I'm a little frustrated by them because I might actually be going to Vegas this weekend to catch a WNBA game, and because they're now playing Vegas, tickets are out, off the charts for hotels and everything. So that's another reason for me to dislike them as a Niner fan. But still, they're a team that is a scrappy team. Antonio Pierce in his first full season as head coach, I think he's really gotten this team into shape, and he's a true leader of men. And the Raiders are going to be a fun, scrappy team to watch going forward. Who, in my opinion, have potential to be a top 5, top 6 defense in the league.
I think they already were projected on that track last year when Antonio Pierce took over. Maxx Crosby kind of said it best. He motivates, he inspires us to play the best football we can. You want to win for this guy. These guys want to run through a wall for Antonio Pierce. And if the Raiders, if they can get their offensive issues like Minshew, he has had good seasons when he was he's had seasons in Jacksonville where he has been a very above average quarterback. The problem with Minshew's always been he combines his very, very good play with a lot of the same things that Jimmy Garoppolo used to do. The boneheaded plays, the bad throws, the tough decisions on turnovers and on late down situations. But if he gets it right, this team still has an all-pro receiver in Devontae Adams. You mentioned the rookie stud in Brock Bowers, who has looked fantastic so far. They have the defense led by Mad Max and the newly signed Christian Wilkins, who looks pretty good in a Raider uniform. Right now. Probably not got the numbers most people think of, but he came in there, and that defense has improved. But it's all about whether the offense can sustain itself. And I get with the Ravens is they're in a division where it's kind of up in the air. Like they're with Cleveland, who has Deshaun Watson and a good defense. What Watson has always been so up and down in the legal issues. The Steelers, like Mike Tomlin can coach his team to 10 wins every year. He always does that. He's never had a losing record as head coach, but it's Justin Fields at quarterback. How much can you really? He threw for less than 150 yards in that game against the Broncos. Like, what do you make of the Ravens? Can they salvage this? Because they're going off to Dallas, and Dallas is going to want to get some revenge after a really rough showing against the Saints.
I think the Ravens are too talented of a team. I mean, again, it's going to be, I think, a fun race between them. And even though the Bengals are 0-2 and they lost to the Chiefs, I think the Bengals are in that conversation too. It's going to be a fun race in that division. I think the Ravens will, come back after this loss. I expect them to win against Dallas. Lamar Jackson is, a top tier quarterback in the league. That team's just far too talented. Derrick Henry's a great running back. I think the Ravens are going to find a way to battle back for sure. But you talked about the Steelers, and obviously they're a team that I think that will be a playoff team. I don't think they're a team that's going to win the division, but also they went up against Bo Nix, who I don't want to hate Bo Nix because I love the Pac-12, but he has just he has not been it so far. He has looked like a bust through 2 weeks. I mean, honestly, right now, Caleb's got to get it together too, but Nix and Williams have looked like two of the biggest busts so far as rookie quarterbacks. I think, the Broncos, it's tough because they don't exactly have the greatest weapons out there either, whereas in Chicago, you've got a little bit more weapons. But both of those teams have a lot to still get together. And I truly don't think we've seen, what the Steelers are capable of because they've played two mediocre opponents in the first 2 weeks of the season, of course, facing the Broncos, and then they faced the Falcons last week, who I would still put on the mid-tier mediocre list. So we're going to see what that team's capable of when it gets to some divisional matchups.
I agree, but if Mike Tomlin knows anything, it's how to coach the defense. He's got a Watt on that side of the ball that looks every bit the defensive player of the year he showed a couple of years back. And defense runs through that Mike Tomlin system. Whoever steps foot in Pittsburgh, like you get in the top 5 defense basically every year. And as long as TJ Watt it's kind of crazy because 2 years ago they went 9-8, but they were 7-2 with TJ Watt in the lineup. And when he was out, they went 2-8. Like when TJ Watt's on the field, it makes all the difference for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
He's the best defensive player in football, no doubt about it. I mean, I think it's going to be a fun race this season. I think that it's going to be between TJ Watt. I'd put Max Crosby on that list, and I'd put Fred Warner on that list. I think that those might be the 3 best defensive players in football right now.
Forget Myles Garrett.
You have to put Myles Garrett on there. The only reason I don't include him in that same tier is because the Browns to me are just dysfunctional as an organization, and I don't see them even making the playoffs or having a winning record. So I don't know exactly where you can put him when it comes to just results based, because NFL awards are really results based when it comes to overall records of teams too. But yeah, Garrett, I would put up in that conversation. But in terms of teams that are going to be playoff teams or at least playoff caliber teams, I think that the 3 players I mentioned are right up there. And I think TJ Watt, I mean, he looks like one of the best players in football. I mean, every single week he single-handedly will win the Steelers ball games.
He finished off the Falcons with that game-ending sack against Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, he's every bit the defensive player of the year he was 2 years prior. As long as he's on the field, the Steelers have a chance. But going to be a fun race up in the Old North. Let's get to some surprising 2-0 teams. The Seattle Seahawks survive a really nice run game from the New England Patriots. Win in overtime, 26-23 to move to 2-0 on the season. Oh, I'm so happy about that as a Niners fan. And then the team that my brother, who is a big fan of, the LA Chargers, Jimmy Harbaugh. This team's 2-0. They thrashed the Panthers 26-3. Of those 2 teams, the Seahawks or the Chargers, which one of you has to make the most noise? And even as a Niners fan, you can't say the Seahawks.
I'm not going to because again, I mean, that game could have gone either way. The Patriots easily could have won that game. The Seahawks, I think, are going to have a bit of they could beat Miami for sure, but they're going to have a wake-up call once they get into division games too. I think them and the Steelers are 2 teams right now that are 2-0, but have a giant asterisk next to that. The Chargers, I mean, they beat the Panthers, sure. They beat the Raiders week 1, played really well defensively. A player that might be arguably the most impressive, surprising player in football right now is J.K. Dobbins, who is a top 5 running back to start the season, looked very mediocre in Baltimore, of course, has gone through some injuries, but he looks like a stud out there. And as a Jim Harbaugh fan too, very impressed to see what the Chargers are doing. Justin Herbert has desperately needed some weapons and has desperately needed some guys to be able to help him out on offense. Now that he has guys like Dobbins, Quentin Johnson that's getting some, touchdowns. Finally, it's about time he did something. Lad McConkey is a rookie, looks promising out there too. The Chargers could be a fun team to watch as well. I don't think that they're Chiefs caliber, but they're a team that I think will be a wild card team and maybe we'll win a playoff game. And I think that if they do that, that's something that Charger fans will be jumping off of walls for and would be extremely happy. Again, Jim Harbaugh will coach any team to a good record. We saw what he did in Michigan. We saw what he did with the San Francisco 49ers, and we're seeing what he's doing already with the Los Angeles Chargers.
I think the best thing I can say about Jim Harbaugh is I was watching an interview on Good Morning Football with Vernon Davis. He taught when they asked him what it was like to, go be coached by Jim Harbaugh. He said that you wanted to wake up every day and you wanted to give your 110% effort for a guy like Jim Harbaugh. This guy is a player motivating coach. And these guys just want to run through a wall for him. Like the first year when Jim Harbaugh was the 49ers coach, he went to the NFC Championship game in 2011. Like this team was a stud team right away. And he only coached there for what, 3 years? And this team, NFC Championship game, Super Bowl, and then we won't talk about 2013, but it was a rough year.
I got to mention too, at Stanford prior to that, beating out God, why am I blanking on the former Seahawks coach Pete
Carroll?
Thank you, Pete Carroll, beating out Pete Carroll, who was at USC at the time, and Harbaugh coaching that team to success, of course, before they got Andrew Luck. So everywhere he goes, it's just pure greatness.
It really is, and you mentioned a lot of the Chargers receivers. I called Quentin Johnson last year Mr. Drop Pass because he had a lot of drops that cost the Chargers a lot of games. But you mentioned a guy like J.K. Dobbins coming off the ACL injury. I was lucky enough to draft him in fantasy with one of my last round picks. He's been my best player so far in one of my leagues. But if there's one thing Jim Harbaugh knows how to do, it's get the most out of players and coach them defense. You got a guy like Navarro Bowman who coaches the linebackers on this team, future Hall of Famer, guy who's going to be a Niner for life. But if he's coaching linebackers, you're going to feel some hit. You're going to feel some hits with those guys.
One of my good friends is a Chargers fan too. I don't think this is going to happen, but nothing would make me happier if we got like a Niners Texans or a Niners Chargers Super Bowl. That would be fun. It'd be one where it's like, okay, if we lose to them, it's heartbreaking because we still don't win, but at least we're losing to a team that I have a ton of respect for and that I can actually genuinely somewhat root for. So the Chargers are a fun team. I love watching the Chargers play.
But if I can go back to the Seattle Seahawks for a minute, Mike Macdonald, the former Ravens defensive coordinator, I think they really miss him in Baltimore because that Seattle defense is looking maybe not the Legion of Boom levels that they were a few years back with Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, all those guys, but it's definitely getting close. It's definitely getting close to it. The problem with them is Geno Smith has good numbers on paper, and all credit to Geno Smith. He was washed away in New York, revived his career in Seattle, got big money from the Seahawks to stay, but it looks good on paper, but why are they only scoring 26 points and beating the Patriots in overtime? Like, can the offense finally catch some consistency? It was a big problem last year, and it still looks to be a big problem now.
I think a big answer to that is going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba. It's a guy that Tyler Lockett has basically passed the reins over to, it feels like, to be the wide receiver 2 there in Seattle. Him along with Metcalf, that's potentially could be one of the better duos in the league. Again, the question comes down to how solid can Geno Smith throw the football on a consistent basis. Also, they were without Kenneth Walker, and their run game looked very bad out there with Zach Charbonnet. I think right now Walker is questionable for this week, so I don't know if he's going to play against Miami. But if Kenneth Walker can get things going, and if he can stay healthy, and Metcalf and Smith-Njigba can keep things going, they're going to be a very dynamic offense to watch in the league. Seattle was a team that were a wild card team with Geno a couple years ago, I want to say, and they're always a team that manages to be competitive. So you can never sleep on Seattle. The NFC West might be the best division in football.
I want to say that that's true. I got to see the Niners. Like, as a Niners fan, I got to see the Niners look like the Niners again, and let's hope that happens against the Rams. Fingers crossed. But Mike McDonald, if he knows anything, he knows how to coach some defense, and the young guys on that excuse me on that roster. The young corners, Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon. Witherspoon was fantastic last year as a rookie. He looks even better now. And that Seattle secondary, maybe they haven't played the greatest quarterbacks in the world in Bo Nix and Jacoby Brissett, Jacoby Brissett is fine, but Bo Nix is a rookie. But let's see him do it against some actual NFL starting quarterbacks. But Mike McDonald does know how to coach in defense. They're very young. They're very young on that defense, especially in the secondary. Now let's get to the Sunday night football game, a team that we may be seeing in New Orleans in the Super Bowl, the Houston Texans. They beat the Bears 19-13. Don't let that score fool you. That Texans defense, aside from one Khalil Herbert touchdown run at the end of the third quarter, this Texans defense locked it up. And CJ Stroud, he's not showing any signs of slowing down. Is this team the best team in the AFC? Can they beat the Chiefs as a Niners fan? How impressed are you with CJ?
The best decision the Texans ever made was hiring DeMeco Ryans as their head coach. And this is a guy who was a heartbreaking to lose him in San Francisco. And my goodness, is he doing wonders for this Texans team. CJ Stroud looks like an MVP candidate so far. Azeez Al-Shaair, a former Niner, going over and doing some incredible things in Houston. Jimmy Ward, of course, on that defense as well. This is a team that is extremely fun to watch. I think I picked them to make the Super Bowl this year and beat the Chiefs. I think that they have all the weapons to do it. Joe Mixon, even though he was a little bit mediocre in the game against Chicago, had a fantastic week one, and he's going to be a big threat and a big weapon for them going forward too. Nico Collins looks like one of the better receivers in football. Of course, they added Stephon Diggs to their lineup this year too, another weapon out there. Dalton Schultz, a guy whom I'm expecting to step up going forward. This team just has weapon after weapon on both sides of the ball, and they're one of the most fun teams to watch right now in a division that is probably the most winnable division right now, with the Titans not playing that well, the Jags looking very mediocre, and the Colts looking like very questionable as well. So we're going to really see what this team's capable of outside of their division games. And despite only winning by 6 against Chicago, I think that was a bad performance for them, and them winning by 6 on Sunday Night Football and that being a bad performance is good signs for them going forward. And I think they're going to make some noise.
You also forgot about one receiver, a guy who's still working his way back from that broken fibula, but he was a big, deep guy last year, and that's Tank Dell. If Tank Dell looks like what he did in the first half of that year for the Texans, this team is going to be unstoppable on offense. And Joe Mixon, while he did have a mediocre game, he did get injured in that game. He questioned whether, it should be a legal hip drop tackle that injured him. But, Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown, Tank Dell. This team is loaded on offense with a guy who probably right now could win MVP with the way his team's playing. Best part for them is they're so young on both sides of the ball. Young guys on that defense like Derek Stingley, Jalen Petrie, the safety, the defensive rookie of the year, Will Anderson, and then you add a guy like Danielle Hunter from the Minnesota Vikings. I'm scared to play the Texans, man. They look like basically what the Saints are. They're complete on both sides, but CJ Stroud is basically a souped-up Derek Carr.
It's a good way to put it.
And let's just quickly glance at the Bears for a second. Caleb Williams only throws for 100 yards, but the offense really just struggles, again, against a very good Houston defense. He's a number one pick. I know Keenan Allen is still banged up. They're still dealing with Rome Odunze in and out of the lineup. DJ Moore is the number one receiver there. They don't really have much of a run game. But what's going on with Caleb? Is this just rookie pains? Is it the play calling? Is it Matt Eberflus has to go? I've seen a lot of Bears fans on social say that Matt Eberflus has to go. What's going on? Is he the savior, or is he just another one of those Chicago Bears busts?
I mean, I think it takes some time to get adjusted to the league. I mean, one of the plays was one of the last plays of the game. Him rolling out of a sure sack, and half his jersey gets pulled off. He rolls to his right and he's throwing deep down the field. I think it was intended for DJ Moore. It might have been Rome, and it gets picked off short. And I mean, I've seen him make that play and make that throw before at USC plenty of times. Again, it's just a matter of getting adjusted to NFL level of play and that NFL speed. He's got weapons. Cole Kmet, I think, could be a guy that could be a decent tight end, even though he's struggled before. DJ Moore, Rome Odunze as a good, rookie weapon for him. But DeAndre Swift, that run game is just struggled. DeAndre Swift did not look good in this game. Of course, he was a solid running back in Detroit. He's come over and they've got a lot of issues. I think it doesn't necessarily start with Caleb. I think it starts with the offensive coordinator and that offensive line. But I mean, they've got problems all over the place, and they have a lot they need to clean up.
I agree, but that defense is going to keep them in games. To hold this the vaunted Houston Texans offense to less than 20 points. Ever since Montez Sweat got there, when he was traded from the Commanders, this team has had the best defense. They had the top defense in the league week 9 after Sweat got there, and it has continued. Like, when they won against the Titans, the only reason they won was because of their defense. A block punt that was returned for a touchdown by Jonathan Owens, a pick six, Tariq Stevenson, a game-sealing interception. So the Bears, if they can just get the offense to even an average level, the defense is good enough. It's like the Jets in that case. If Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, or at least semi-Aaron Rodgers, they're going to win because what they had before wasn't winning them games, but the defense would always keep them in games. It's the same with the Bears. If Caleb can get to an average level, this team can be good. If he's going to play like this, they're going to be very bad. But let's get to the final game. This was quite a stunner. A Saquon Barkley drop in Philly leads to a game-winning drive for old Captain Kirk to Drake London to end the game. The Falcons are 1-1. The Eagles look rattled. People are calling for Sirianni's head in Philly. What a stunner in Philly.
They're 2-9 in their last 11 games. I just got to say something for a second. Alabama fans out there, I'm sorry for you. You have Mac Jones, who's now benched. You have Bryce Young, who's now benched, unjustly so, in my opinion. And then you have Jalen Hurts, who's 2-9 in his last 11 starts, and then Tua, of course, who's going through concussions right now. Alabama quarterbacks have to be cursed. I mean, they're just absolutely cursed right now. And Hurts didn't play a bad game. I mean, I don't think he was special, but I mean, he had 2 touchdowns, ran for a touchdown in this game. Devontae Smith had a solid game. He was without his top weapon in AJ Brown, so it'll be interesting to see what they can do once he comes back. But I mean, man, I don't know what's up with Philly right now. They have struggled since midseason last season. Nick Sirianni, I'm not an Eagles fan. Nick Sirianni comes across as one of the most cockiest guys in all of football, so nothing makes me happier than seeing them lose games. But credit to the Falcons. Kirk Cousins going in his first season as a starter in Atlanta, Darnell Mooney and Drake London being weapons for him, and he's using them. Bijan Robinson nearly 100 yards out there rushing. He's one of the better running backs in all of football. And how about another former 49er, Ray McCloud?
Yes!
Getting stuff done out there, too, for the Atlanta Falcons. So Falcons are another scrappy team. Of course, Kyle Pitts, we'll see what he can do this year. They've definitely got a fair amount of weapons themselves. I think a big thing for them is going to be, how that defense holds up and if Kirk Cousins is able to continue staying consistent. It's going to be a dogfight in that division, though, as we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah. They're competing with 2 very, very good teams, but you mentioned the defense. You mentioned the defense and Kirk Cousins, if that's how Atlanta's going to be good. The Atlanta Falcons defense was a very good defense last year. I believe they were top 10 against the pass last year and then they go and add guys late in the game, a great pass rusher in Matthew Judon, and an all-pro safety in Justin Simmons, along with Jesse Bates, who was an all-pro safety in Cincinnati. They have a great running back in Bijan Robinson. They have really good skill. They supposedly have very good skill players in Drake London and Kyle Pitts. It always was the quarterback, Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota. Ever since Matt Ryan left, they've really gotten nothing out of their quarterbacks. So if they can just get Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins is coming off a torn Achilles. Let us not discredit the fact that he is coming off one of the most significant injuries in all of sports. But if he can start to look right again, if he looks like the Kirk Cousins of last year that was putting up over 500 yards of offense against the 49ers to send them on a back-to-back losing streak after a 5-0 start. If he looks like that guy, they're dangerous. They're very dangerous. If Drake London continues to look the way he looked like what he did on that touchdown drive, they look like a scrappy team. Maybe they're not going to win a playoff game, but they can make some noise. And then as for Philly, you go and get a guy like Saquon Barkley. That drop hurts. To see him just drop a gimme that if he gets that ices the game. We're talking Philly 2-0, Dallas struggling. This is going to be a coast ride, and I mean, you get a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, you get a new defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio, but nothing looks right. The secondary was gashed by Bijan Robinson and Kirk Cousins. I mean, I can say safely that the Niners broke the Eagles last year. It really did.
The best meme of the week that I saw is that you can take Saquon Barkley out of the Giants, but you can't take the Giants out of Saquon Barkley. Yeah, man, it just proved true on that play. And I still think Saquon is going to be, for the most part, fine. But again, the big question is, can the Eagles get right? Once AJ Brown is back in the mix, and again, they're lucky they're in a very mediocre division that they can probably still sneak by and potentially win it. But the big question is, what are you going to be? What kind of team are you going to not look like a contender whatsoever compared to what they've been in previous years?
All right. They don't look anything like that 2022 team that was locking up everybody in the pass game. James Bradbury has fallen off the last 2 years. So has Darius Slay. They lost a lot of guys in that secondary. Jason Kelce retiring off that offensive line.
CJ Gardner-Johnson looks horrible out there.
Yeah, he was supposed to fix it. They signed him to a 3-year deal. He was supposed to fix the secondary. He's been burned. He got burned by Darnell Mooney on a 46-yard touchdown.
Who did a front flip in front of his face.
But I mean, Philly fans are very passionate fickle. If this continues to go on, there are going to be a lot of Philly fans calling for some heads in Philly. Nick Sirianni especially. Maybe even a guy like Jalen Hurts, because Howie Roseman, that GM, has been known to pull the trigger pretty quickly on guys if he sees that there are guys behind him that look good. He did it with Carson Wentz when Jalen Hurts was there. He benched a runner-up for league MVP for Jalen Hurts. It worked out for him, and he knows what he's doing. If this continues to go on, it could be disastrous in Philly. But let's get to some NFL news, and you alluded to this. The Carolina Panthers benching top overall pick from 2023 Bryce Young for Andy Dalton. This is a guy they went up and traded the number one overall pick next with their first round pick next year, and DJ Moore, an all-pro receiver, to get Bryce Young, who they thought was going to be the savior of their franchise. He has been absolute garbage in Philly. I don't even think garbage is putting it lightly. This team has been awful since he became starting quarterback. I don't think it's all to do with Bryce Young, but he has a lot to do with it. Your reaction to just seeing the news that he's been benched, it's pretty sad.
I honestly think that, while he is by far from a good quarterback, I think that they don't have a lot of weapons out there. I think that's the biggest problem for the Panthers is your top receiver is arguably Adam Thielen out there on the field, who is, I want to say 34 years old. Deontay Johnson, who was horrible in Pittsburgh. You have no run game, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. I don't think it's all on Bryce. I don't expect Andy Dalton to fix this either. So the Panthers are just an incompetently ran organization. They have got a lot of holes that they need to fill too. It shouldn't be all on Bryce Young, but he definitely has not helped the situation either. So they've got a tough future ahead of them.
I mean, I saw on First Take this morning, Mad Dog calling them the third worst organization in all of sports. And that's saying a lot when you have teams that have been disastrously bad for a long time. Like David Tepper has been the owner of the Panthers, has been called into question multiple times for some of the decision making, for having his note. He's sort of basically been the Jerry Jones of that team, where he's a little bit involved too much. And the worst decision the Panthers ever made was not drafting a guy right after Bryce Young, who's pretty good, that guy, and CJ Stroud. I don't know if CJ's even fixing this situation with what's going on in Carolina. This looks basically unsolvable at this point. Let's get to some other injury news. Of course, I alluded to this. The Rams lose Cooper Kupp, 4 weeks out with an ankle sprain. They send Jonah Jackson, their starting guard, to IR, and Deebo Samuel now out with a calf strain. It just puts a lot of pressure on that Niners Rams game. Like, who wins the battle of the injuries?
Niners have too many weapons. I think they're going to come away with the win. Again, I think Ayuk's going to put it together. They still have Kittle. They still have Jordan Mason. The Rams are super depleted. I think the Niners will pull away with the win in Levi South.
I totally agree. And before we wrap it up here, and again, thank you so much for your time. I have really appreciated it. This being the inaugural show, you are a sport junkie, but couple games, I think, to get excited for in week 3, just some big matchups. I mean, 2 for me, probably Detroit and Arizona. That should be a really good one. If the Lions offense looks right, that's going to be a shootout. And then Saints and Eagles. Let's see if New Orleans offense is for real. If this continues and they're 3-0, we might be talking about them as the class of the NFC. But that's going to do it for or anything you'd like to add on any big games you're looking at in week 3?
Just I like you said, I think that Detroit game is going to answer a lot about both teams. I do expect Detroit to win that game, but the Saints and Eagles, like you said, are going to be another fun one. I think the Saints are going to pull away with the win, which might surprise some people, but watch out. New Orleans has got a lot to say.
I think New Orleans already said a lot, and if they go 3-0, we might be talking about another Drew Brees Super Bowl in the Superdome, and Drew Brees celebrating on those Mardi Gras floats with another Super Bowl. But again, Aaron, thank you so much. Before we go, where can people find your work? Because you got a lot of great content. So let's just do a little plug for you and just show off your amazing talent.
So I have my high school sports page, Jack High Sports Preps, on Patreon. I post probably about 4 or 5 things a week. I have a podcast over there as well called At the Sports Desk, where I cover weekly stuff with my good friend Thomas Frey from Max Preps. He's the Chargers fan I alluded to earlier. And then I do some announcing for Lincoln High School. If you ever want to come out to a football game out there, there's some good games this year. They're 3-0 for the first time since COVID. And then I do some broadcasting for ABC Jam Productions. Good friend Matthew Bissett over there, who does great work, and we cover multiple games each week. So we got all that going on, and I also call some games at Jessup. So if anybody wants to ever come out to William Jessup and listen to some soccer games, I'll be on the call for those too. So yeah, very exciting.
Not to mention your incredible Liberation Hour podcast on YouTube. Again, I incredibly encourage you to listen to that. It's a great listen. But again, thank you so much. This is going to do it for the first episode of the Touchdown Drives. We will be back next week with some week 3 recaps. Hopefully we get this guy back on here because it's been a lot of fun. Again, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you very much too.